there's a couple marinas on the south side of that island, right?
Yep.
We can go in near there. Should we get underway?
Any bucket list of beautiful places would surely include the Florida Keys. 1,800 islands dotted along an ancient coral reef. And what better tour guide than a conch like Hans?
If you were born and raised on the island, you're a conch. You're referred to as a conch or a bubba.
As we cruised towards some of Hans's favorite places, I kept wondering if a bucket list here is about our time left or about the time left for this place.
But water's tough. You know, the ocean is tough. The water flow in general, you know, look at the Grand Canyon. So maybe the Keys won't survive.
It's a sad thing to think about, though.
Yeah. You know, the water level rise from the numbers that you were relating earlier in your...
Hans was talking about this.
All right, I'm still rolling.
We shot a little earlier.
Possibly the most important thing to understand about sea level rise is that what has happened is not what's going to happen, especially here in Florida. Over the last 100 years or so, the water has risen about 9 inches. But in the next 20, 25 years, that amount will likely double. 18 inches of sea level rise in the next couple decades. And that amount of water is going to put much of the Florida Keys underwater.
Yeah, that's alarming. Puts it into a perspective, you know? And there's no doubt it's happening.
Hans can point to the subtle changes, but there are also the not so subtle. King tides, the highest high tides that swamp roads.
The most intense Atlantic hurricane ever recorded.
Hurricanes like Wilma and Irma.
My favorite place in the whole world. But what can you do?
Pushing ever higher waters across these shrinking islands and into people's homes.
Couldn't see 8 feet away. It was such a whiteout of water.
In the next 5 to 10 years, you know, the impacts, the flood days per year are accelerating. So it's not going to be a slow, gradual change. The types of impacts that are occurring now are going to worsen, but one thing's for certain is all the telltales are pointing to more flooding. It's going to become deeper, more severe, more consequential in the next decade or so.
William and his colleagues at NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, work on projections like this. The ocean on course to swallow much of the Florida Keys under 12, 18 inches of sea level rise in less than 30 years. And if you think a grim forecast like that might scare away newcomers, it's quite the opposite.
We haven't seen a slowdown in housing, to tell you the truth, at all. I think we're at record levels here in the Keys because it is so fabulous and so beautiful.
Rhonda is the Chief Sustainability Officer for the Keys for Monroe County. And she showed us the extensive and expensive work needed to keep 150 miles of important roads above water.
Right now, these are the areas we're looking at: Upper Keys, Middle Keys, Lower Keys, and even a little bit in Key West.
But despite that, real estate is booming, in part because supply is quite literally disappearing.
Property values are going through the roof, and it leaves less infrastructure for the working class.
So then where do the people that work in the hotels and restaurants, I mean, where do they live?
5 to 10 deep in any place they can find. And that's literally how it's going. Like,
Hans kept showing us basically entire neighborhoods on water.
sure, where all the boats are anchored up, that's what amounts to affordable housing.
Houseboats, which are no longer a second home, they're many people's only home. So in the Keys, it seems like they're facing conventional gentrification, rising housing costs being amplified by climate change. You call that climate gentrification?
That's right. So in many cities, we see both climate gentrification and conventional gentrification happening at the same time. And the challenge for the Florida Keys is, where are we going to build next? They've essentially run out of land. So every year when we lose a little bit of land or a road here or a neighborhood there goes underwater, it really adds up because every housing unit counts, every road counts. So as sea level rise begins to creep in, it adds additional costs.
Jesse Keenan and his research partner, Marco Tedesco, will soon publish a study, the first of its kind, to identify and measure climate gentrification. They We found plenty of evidence of it across Florida as wealthy people and businesses seek higher land.
And so what they do, they just go in a bulldozing way. Let's move completely away, and we need that piece of land, and then we use the power of money, the power of finance.
Their clearest example, Tampa, Florida, and the neighborhood Dixie Farms, a working class community, primarily people of color, that's lost more than 2/3 of its population in 20 years. Their research shows it's being squeezed by businesses, industry trying to escape sea level rise.
And so what they're trying to do is move inland and move to a lower risk area. And so that's really accelerating the concentration of industrial development and commercial development in an area that historically has been a site for low to moderate income housing.
And these resources are actually pushing out the socially vulnerable population in the area. So this is a phenomenon that is relatively new.
I mean, what's to stop it? You just gotta move and go somewhere else if you wanna be healthy.
This father of three is talking about a battery recycling plant which moved in just blocks from his kids' elementary school.
It's a kind of double whammy. One, they're getting forced out, but they're also being exposed to the increasing levels of pollution that are happening in their neighborhood.
But climate gentrification continues, visible from Google Earth, showing growing patches of land where people once lived from this mobile home park, sold and cleared out to individual lots. Basically an island of the last few houses left.
Yeah, I get letters every day, people wanting to buy my house.
Really?
Yeah, like basically every day.
Why do you say no?
I don't want to move.
And it's the same for his neighbors across the street. This woman has lived here for 12 years. These folks have lived here for more than 10 years. And they told me they don't want to move either. And if for some reason they had to, they're not even sure where they could afford to go.
Because money and climate change are inseparable. Those who have enough money can delay the impact, postpone some of the inevitable effects of sea level rise. In this neighborhood in Tampa, and especially in the Keys, where they need roughly $2 billion to keep critical roads above water, and time is not on their side.
It's not just unincorporated Monroe, it's the cities, it's businesses and residents all understanding, okay, we know it's coming. How are we going to implement these plans? Are we going to implement them all? How are we going to pay for them? And that's going to be the real issue, is funding these type of projects.
Core infrastructure is increasingly being flooded. They simply do not have the tax base or the money to be able to elevate these roads. And they've essentially come to a conclusion that they have to prioritize some places over others. They've begun the process of picking winners and losers, and there are entire communities in Monroe County that essentially will be left to their own devices.
Honestly, we're looking 20 years down the road, and if it continues the way it is, the only people left here in 20 years are going to be the high-end property owners.
If we get to a point where sea level rise starts to impact, like it's flooding roads and it's, putting marinas underwater, if the tourists start coming, I mean, that's also, like, you live and die by that too, right? Like that's your bread and butter.
Oh yeah.
Do you think about that? Or do you just try not to? You just try and like focus on right now? Right now.
I hadn't considered the fact that less people would come here if we were all underwater, because it's not really that dramatic of a concern right now. But yeah, that's a valid concern.
If you think about like money, like can we build seawalls and protect areas? Yeah, but it's really expensive. And so then we have to start making choices of, okay, do we protect Key West and everything around it goes? Like then we have to start having those conversations.
We have to do that first. We have to protect the Florida Keys first.